Hey chaps, and welcome back to another fantastic episode. If I look a little red-faced, it's because I went to the all-Ford day yesterday and got a little bit hot. Yes, very red. Toasty, you might say. I did have a good day at the all-Ford day. I did think the lineup of cars, as in the cars that were there, were really good. The way they were laid out was terrible, but it was a good event. And I caught up with quite a few chaps and a few followers, which was nice, bit of a surprise. Good meeting you chaps, and yeah, that was a fun day, and got myself a little bit pink. In today's episode, which is going to span the repairing and whatnotting of this wagon, so official first video, full-length video back is actually going to be this wagon. Sorry, but I'll give you an update on the XD because that's made some progress. But we're going to be doing the chassis rail on this wagon. It's going to be walking you through placing a chassis rail on a VF Commodore wagon. Now I have the repair procedures, I have the new genuine parts, I have the skills and the technology to do it. So I should be able to do it without screwing up, in theory. So let's chuck on an intro and show you what we've been up to. Alrighty chaps, the bonnet and boot lid are still left to go, but the body shell is, and the bumper bar, front bumper bar, and the exhaust panel still left to go, but it's not looking too bad. I've had some issues with panel gaps on this side because this whole entire side has been wiped out over a period of time. So this car will probably never be entirely square, and getting things to line up has been ridiculously painful. But yes, it's getting there. So, you know, it is what it is. I'm not a painter. I don't ever profess to be one. I don't actually like painting. I find it incredibly stressful. It's just not my thing, and I don't ever want to do it again for another customer. But it's not too bad. I mean, I do my own stuff, but I'm not doing, no words can describe how stressful I find painting. But here we are. We'll have to, this has been buried for 2 months. There we go. Yeah. Oh, it's like Indiana Jones. Dusty. Oops, did I trip on the bag? Get off! Shoo! Right, so we're going to move this out, probably over here, and then get into this car. So I'll move this and then we'll jump back into where we left off about 2 months ago. So chaps, one of the tricks you can do with new parts, not aftermarket or anything like that, is they come with stickers all over them. So you get your prep salt bottle and you just spray it on. You let it soak. This is mainly only useful information if you worked in a crash shop and you have to do this quite regularly. You'll see it sort of soak through, and in theory it should just flake off, because obviously Prepsol is wax and grease remover. Oops, probably a bit too close to the camera, but I mean usually you'd leave it for more than 10 minutes, you'd spray it on, walk away, do something else and then come back, but that's how you get your stickers off. I know that's sort of, I'm sure most people know how to get stickers off, but the old spray Prepsol and walk away, so you can see it soaking in around the edges. So once it's completely soaked in, yeah, just like that, your stickers come off. You don't have to sand them off or anything stupid like that. Just another little handy hint for those playing at home who might be just crazy enough to want to go down the repairable write-off path. I am slightly annoyed. The other day I was bidding on another one of these Commodores. It was smacked in the tush, and it was the same colour, same model, same everything. It's just a sedan and had been smacked to the bum in the tush. And I got outbid drastically. Like, it went for like over $7,000, which is insane, because I only paid a smidge over 4 for this, and we only paid a smidge over 4 for the last one before that. So I was very displeased when I was bidding against somebody and they obviously wanted it more than me. I think I was versing a newbie who didn't know when to stop, but I believe I made him pay for it, because I really wanted it. I know that I knew what the cost of the new parts were, so I had wiggle room to be able to bid up to a certain point, but they paid through the nose for theirs. Unfortunately, I really wanted it, but apparently they were a bit more crazy than I was. So that would have given me all of the front, bonnet guards, headlights, radiator support, everything in the right colour too. So I was bummed, but I'm not stupid to overbid for something. But on to the next thing. We'll dig out the new chassis rail and do the same sticker treatment to that. Alrighty people, now these are repair procedures. I may have gone through them before in another video, but I'm going to go through them again because they are particularly important, especially doing write-offs. If you do not have these, or the ones for your vehicle manufacturer, you have approximately 0 chance of getting your car inspected and passed. Because without these repair procedures, the inspectors will think that you fixed it backyard style and did chonkies. They want to make sure that you've done everything properly and to the industry standard. And I know a lot of people get rejected when they take the car through the first time. It's because these guys have been cracking down on shonky repairs, because plenty of people do them, and they are wanting everything done to a safe manner. Now, repairable write-offs are a funny thing. I thought I'd go through the fact that there are 3, when you buy a car from the auctions, there's 3 categories. You got WOVR NA, so it's WOVR NA, which means the car isn't on the register, which means there's nothing, rego hasn't been cancelled, etc, etc. It's obviously too old or wasn't insured at the time when it was smashed. Then you got repairable write-offs. Now that's a car that is perfectly safe to be repaired, obviously beyond not beyond repair, but the insurance company has found it financially viable to just pay out the person rather than having the car fixed. And that tends to happen a lot more these days than you think, because it's quicker and easier and gets people moving again. And then you got statutory write-offs, which are game over, mate. That car is only for parts. If you're going to buy a car to fix, do not, and I repeat, do not buy a statutory write-off. You cannot fix them. They are not allowed to be fixed. They've sustained damage that is beyond repair, safe repairs. I mean, there are some countries, and I've seen some videos on YouTube from places like I think Taiwan and things like that, where these chaps are doing some huge repairs to cars. But we don't do those in Australia. That's a no-fly zone. It's too dangerous. As much as those other countries probably think it's safe, it never happens in Australia. If you've done something that's damaged the car in such a way, they just go, nope, no fixies. So you stick with repairable write-offs because they are, as their name says, repairable. They've just been deemed economically more viable to just pay the person out than fix them. Or especially in this particular wagon's case, the spare parts to replace all the damage would have far exceeded whatever it was financially viable for. But I'm just crazy enough to do it. And 9 times out of 10, a car that goes to a crash shop doesn't end up with like every single part being second hand. They usually get new or aftermarket or something like that, and it's generally more expensive. Whereas repairable write-offs, you are in fact allowed to use second hand parts as long as you have proof of purchase, VIN numbers of the cars they come from, photos of the cars the parts come from, and that you haven't taken parts from a car that's been done something shonky. So you've got to be on your game a little bit. So I have got 2 repair procedures. Now these are for Holden particularly difficult to get because Holden don't sell them anymore. have to go through a different mob. I can't remember who you go through, but one of the safety mobs have them, and you have to pay a fairly good price for them. I mean, for the ability to see them. So we got 2 repair procedures, one for the little end cap down here, which is this little guy. This is like 1 page, and it actually, in the scheme of things, couldn't be simpler really. That's the whole thing in one go. You drill out the spot welds, prep the surfaces, put it in, weld it back in. So pretty darn straightforward. So what I'm going to do is put this one in first, and then we'll jump on the rail. So this is fairly straightforward. It's actually, as you can tell, it's like 2 welds, 2 welds, 2 welds. Should be 1, 2, 3, 6 welds in total, I think. Yeah, something like that. Fairly straightforward, but even doing something as simple as this in a write-off, you have to have procedures for. If you run a welder anywhere near your car, you're going to need them. Now this one is where we get a bit more interesting. Also in the procedures it tells you exactly what to do, including removing engine assembly, which happens to be over there. Now. I've got my chassis rail over here, which is there, the big new one. So I've got it, it's really heavy too, so I'm going to have to trim that down. But I need to make sure that I don't cut past any datum points or point where a measurement is taken to and from. So fairly straightforward. Basically on this one you're just unspot welding or drilling out the spot welds on that top bracket, but leaving the top of the strut in, going down and then just taking one measurement from there to there, and you're just lopping that front section off, and then your cuts will be made. So on this one here you'll be going from your end cut back a certain distance and then doing another slice and then drilling out the spot welds, because your rail has to be sectioned in there. And then down here the same thing again, and you take a datum point back and forth. And then up here, yep, so there you go, you drill out your section off a little sliver, because your new rail has got the inner section of the rail goes back further than the outside section, if that makes sense, because the rails are in 2 halves, and then obviously because the welds are staggered, and that's the right way to do things. And yeah, and then this is obviously running you through what your welding procedures are, which is fairly, and then obviously glue, tab A to part B and put it all back together. So I thought I'd run you through the procedures, which means you have done everything to, and these are GM, so yeah, so you can't get any better procedures. This is the stuff that the factory has made for this vehicle. Now if I take the camera off this stand and like that, alright, so on this particular side, Holden actually, between VE and this one, you've actually got the ability to replace the rail somewhere here, but it just happens to be right where the damage is, so that's a bit sucky, but it's basically the same thing. So I've done measurements about 2 months ago. So this is about where the main cut is going to be. You can't go back past that. This is where the steel becomes stupidly strong, and this is basically all sacrificial. A little bit rusty. Good thing I'm replacing it. So we've got to drill out these spot welds through here, and actually we'll probably do it on the other side because there's multiple layers here, and we're only trying to take off what effectively is this guy here. And then you slice this off, and then, sorry, my bad, I got it about the wrong way. The outside one staggers back further than the inside one, sorry. So your inside one is effectively right where you chop the rail off, and it's going to be fairly straightforward, because what I'll do is once I've cut this piece off, I'll chop off, once this is laying on a bench, I'll chop off a next little bit, and I can lay this directly on top of the new rail, line up all these holes, and do a slice that will have it in the perfect spot. Alright, I'll move around here, and hopefully I don't stab my eyes out with the remnants of that guard. Ah yes, so first cut's here, second cut's here, so it's actually staggered back by about that much. So that's where the next join will be, and obviously we'll take off it through here, and that's my datum point there. So I'll get into that and we'll catch up in a second. So what I've just done is I've just lopped off a section of this thing that I definitely do not need. I had to make sure I kept this datum point because this is actually a fairly important one, because on the car that's actually the point you take a lot of your measurements from. So like I was saying before, which I got a little bit backwards but I'm right now, is the outside of this rail is going to be staggered back. I think it's 25 mil further back than the inside, so the welds are in different spots. So on this one you're pretty much getting the slice that you do to cut that off is actually the slice that it joins back through, and I believe it's actually right through here. It's a bit annoying that the factory decided to put this little extra hole in it, because that means the weld is going to be right between those two. But as long as we're on this side of this laser weld, we're all good. And I mean, that's what the factory repair procedures say to do. That's what we've got to do, as stupid as it might be. And this one is obviously going to be, I think, just here somewhere, which is obviously in front of this one. So even these factory laser welds are staggered. So one's here and one's, well, basically this one's here and the other side one is effectively here, so there's a good joint. And then of course weld, 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 and that is actually effectively as simple as it is to put on. Just all about getting the measurements right, and making it all beautiful. Couple of days. So I will now go drill out some spot welds on that and start removing the front section of that rail. So I'll see you in a brief second. So what I've done here, as the keen observers you will note, that I have actually drilled out some spot welds, but before I chiseled anything or did anything, I take note of how well aligned those two holes are. But I've got a little pick tool and I've scratched in the holes. I've scribed across the top here, across here, around here, down here, so that when I have that piece and it's sitting in here and I've got it all jigged up, that I can make sure all of that, especially this bracket, because these are built my machines, in theory it should all go back to exactly where it was. I should be able to put that exactly in the right spot. And the other reason I bought rad support and Rio and things like that is, when I have this sitting in place, I'll get the other rail cap changed and have that sitting in place, and I'll bolt up the rad support and the Rio and all the jazz and get it all, making sure everything's sitting pretty. Make sure it's all sitting lovely, and have it all test fitting before I weld it all up. It should be fairly straightforward. I don't foresee any real problems, because the rail sort of kinked on the other side but not this side. It's kind of weird. So it should be fairly straightforward, but if you scribe out your lines, drill out your spot welds, it should all go back to exactly where it was. But now it's moment of truth time. We've got to just double check from that hole there where I've done the line through it to exactly how far the paperwork says, and then we'll make sure we get a arrow straight line, or as good as you can get with a sort of a few steps in it, and slice all the way through, take the rail off, and then when we do this cut back to here, because I think that's where the join's going to be from measurements, you can take this piece that you take off here, go sit it on that rail, and then cut it, and you should be very close to where you were. And the other point is, I'm going to make sure I take some measurements from, say, like this guy all the way forward and things like that, so I can make sure that that rail, you know, end to end is the right length. It should be fairly straightforward. You can't get it too far wrong. I mean, it's going to sit fairly snug and evenly. The gap between here and here is fairly even, so that's going to be your length, that'll be your height. You'll have your Rio on there, and it should be fairly straightforward, really. So now I'm going to do a couple of key measurements. I'm not going to film it because, well, I want to be paying some attention to it, and then I'll chop the end of the rail off, and we can have a mild panic attack. One of the things I was thinking about doing was ringing up a wreckers and buying an empty cradle to bolt underneath, to make sure it was all lined up in the right spot, and basically use it as a jig, because one of the bolt holes is right through the front, and there's one down here, one here, so there's 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. So in theory, if it bolted in fairly snug and this one went in, you could almost absolutely guarantee that the cradle and the chassis rail was in the right spot. It's just a thought, don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but we can at least cut this rail off and move right along. I've decided to change my mind. No, not really. Got it off. Got it. Well, fairly straight cut considering the less than fun angles I've been on, but that stays there. As you can see, if we go around here, yeah, that stays like that. And we go over meow, and we get a really good idea of the bend. So what looked to be a fairly simple repair has turned into a disaster. So it's got a dip in here, as you can see, it goes woo. It's got a bulge up here, and I put my straight bar on this, and across the top of this rail is absolutely arrow straight. And when this was on the car, from up the back there to here, there was a 5mm gap, so just enough to be painful. And yeah, she's pretty wonky. Yeah, because it's all bulged in there. Yeah, which is funny because it's kind of really sad, really, because actually the repair procedures allow you to put a section of rail on, so when they went to VF you can do that much of the rail, or is it there somewhere there, but actually, sorry, scratch that, I think it's actually here, and that's one of the reasons I couldn't do it, is because it's right where the damage was. I don't know, it was somewhere in this region, I can't quite remember exactly, but I know that it's stuffed me. But we got the rail off, and she's looking a bit sad, although really in the scheme of things not too bad. But I don't want to risk anything, because I mean, if you'd left that and then you'd crash it again, oh, game over, mate. Good dip though, eh? But there we go, look, lovely, yes. So yeah, right here is where it's got somewhere the bolts are on me, because it's actually just right there is where the kink is. So now what we do is we continue along, tra-la-la-la, and I think now we have to actually make sure that doesn't blow away, because that would be bad. Sit, good paperwork. And now we have to section off the outer rail section, which is there, and then we can start trimming up the new one to be a perfect matchup. It really, in the scheme of things, is a horrendously straightforward task. It's not anything that you should cry about or write home about. It's actually quite easy. It's just drill, cut, it's all about getting the measurements right and doing it exactly the way the factory says. And luckily this rail is perfect. See, that's where the other one dipped. This one is just beautiful. So all we have to do on this side is rail cap. But this side took the biggest hit. I believe the driver might have speared off to one side, which thusly ruined the car. But anyway, moving right along. Alrighty, second cut is done. I've tried to go as straight as possible, but it was a bit tricky to do this top section with the brake line that close. But I got there. All I'm going to do now is actually take this piece over to the new rail and basically use it as a cut here, don't cut here type thing. what's funny, because the book says, the paperwork really, it says 50mm back. You know, it's funny, I would have actually, if it was me personally, I probably would have gone a bit further back than that, just for more strength. So if I was doing it and made the decision, I would probably do it down through here and make it more like 10mm, I mean 100mm, not 50mm. I think just me personally, I would have preferred the stagger to be a bit further back, but if that's what the factory think is good to do, then that's what is good to do, and that's what's getting done. So now it's time to chop up the new rail section and glue tab A to part B. But actually we're making relatively good progress. I'm actually rather happy so far. So we don't have to cut any more off this. Probably have to clean it up a little bit and, you know, copper spray and get all the daggy bits off and la 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 la. But that's trimmed up, ready to go. That's pretty much how they say. Just go cut here and then cut back, cut there, drill out the welds, done. So fairly straightforward. I do like the idea of it being in the middle of the shock towers too, because you've got a big brace here, cradle goes underneath, so the joint is right in the middle of everything, so it should be a very strong piece of car where that joint is, so it does make sense. Anyway, moving right along. So one of the ways you can cheat a little bit is if you slice off a little bit of the old rail, you can, if you do it in such a way that you have certain things there, you can just drop your, if I can line it up a bit better, I did have it a little bit better than that. But yeah, you can drop it down, line up all your holes, and your cut should be almost exactly where your other one was. And the upside being is when you took off the other side at the back, it also had a nice section to do on the other side, so you should be able to have the new section match up almost perfectly to the car. And the interesting thing I've noticed, and it's kind of funny really, you can tell a machine built this because all of the spot welds are in exactly the same spot no matter what the panel is. So that's cool. But yes, I'm going to slice this through here, zip, turn it over, do the other one, which should be about here, and then sit this on the car, I reckon, and see how we're looking. Moment of truth time, but in theory though, if I drop these, obviously you'll have to do it in stages where like this half is down here, scribe a line, cut it, and then move it up so it sits flat on the top, and you can line those ones up and then do that cut and then rotate it down to do that side, because this is the same size as this won't fit. It's not bigger than this, it's the same size, so it's not actually going to go perfectly over. So there's that, but anyway, it's enough to get you almost exactly where you need to be. So there's a dent there, it's got a dent on the inside of that, so there's almost no way you could get that wrong. Yeah, and so I'll just rotate it a little bit and then we're good. So next thing you will see is this trimmed up and possibly sitting in place. Alright, considering it's not in its final position, it actually fits rather well, and the joys of having using the old bits for the cuts, it's actually, if I can zoom in, mighty close. I do need to trim it a little bit because you do need a little bit of a gap between your welds, but it's better to have a bit too much than not enough, because that would be bad. Yeah, aside from shaking like a crazy person when I was wandering the angle grinder near the chassis rail, because I still find it horrifically nerve-wracking, it is actually a relatively straightforward job, and it's not that difficult, but it still makes you, you know, a little bit when it's go time. But I know that it's... Now the interesting thing is, what throws you on these cars is the chassis rails don't stick out dead straight. They actually go out on a bit of a... they point outwards on each other. So if you were to get measurements of the firewall, they would not be the same at the front. They'd be miles out, because these chassis rails are designed to be splayed out for some reason. Maybe it's just how it is. But so far, hoo-yah! See, that's what I want. I want a gap like that on the other side, but I was having trouble cutting it, so. But we're sitting very, very similar to how it was. I reckon if I put a screwdriver in there and just twist it a little bit, it'll shift that hole over slightly and then I can reclamp it. But that is, as a just stick it on and see how we're looking, it's certainly not bad. I'm actually rather happy about that. So moving right along to the next problem, which is just pull it back off, trim it up, and then clean up all my edges and wala la hoo ha he. And then I reckon we go over there and undo that rail cap and then clean it up and get the new one in and see how that's fitting, and we'll put the Rio and rad support on a few things like that, eh? I think that's not a bad idea. G'day. Well chaps, I'm going to wrap it up here. I was going to do it in a whole entire video, but I decided that in case I make any floofs, it would be better just to do it as I go. I have hit a snag. I do want to actually go to the Holden shop, which is actually now an MG dealership, and buy the new bonnet and guards and a few things just before I go welding. I know it's all fitting pretty good, and it actually, I mean, if you look at centered holes and things like that, and these are sitting on there, you can see little squares where they used to be, so I've just put them back where they were, and weirdly enough that's exactly how that one was. I've just put them back to where they were. I've got my new end cap just sitting in. Yeah, looking lovely. It's all actually fitting rather well, but I do want to get a bonnet and a pair of guards before I go welding it all together, just because I want to make sure that, you know, panel fit, I want to trial fit it together with, you know, things, the guards bolted to here and, you know, through here and a few things like that. I want to make sure it's all, and I'm going to get a catch too, because the catch was absolutely destroyed. So I want a bonnet and a catch and make sure that it's all going to, you know, sit right. I mean, it's all fitting right, and this was in its natural position. It was sort of in a bit with those two touching, so when I push it out to the right spot, I just put a 1mm sheet of steel in the gap, because that's actually probably about the gap I want for a weld, and it also happened to be the gap of the blade that cut it, so it actually sits quite nice. Right height, right angles, looking lovely. But I just want to have the other bits before I just, you know, it's better to have it, you know, right and trial fitted before you go welding it hammer and tongs and realizing that you made a huge mistake in the rails in the wrong spot or yada yada yada. So it's better to be safe and have the bits that you need, and then you should, in theory, be able to have the bonnet and the guards on and the Rio and the rad support all fitting, and still be able to go in there and weld that with it all in its final position. I've still got to tidy it up a bit, but I just want to trial fit it with everything before. So I'm going to stop the video here. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this, the nitty gritties, but so far so good. But by the end of this week I'll probably put out a few videos, and this job, I want to be able to, I want this vehicle to move under its own power by the end of this week, which would be smashing. And there's no reason, if I can get the parts, it shouldn't be doable. I just might be a little bit poor by the end of the week, that's all. Because the bonnet's like $750, the guards are $500 a pop. Maybe $485.58 I think, $458 a guard. I know the headlights are $550 a pop. So, and I don't really want to use aftermarket stuff, because it just, if the car wasn't bent in the chassis rail, I probably would, but considering it's meant for getting things exactly right, I'd rather use genuine, because the aftermarket stuff is never quite right, and I don't want to trial fit a car that needs something very important to be right with aftermarket guards that have panel gaps that look like a wavy ocean. So I'll wrap it up here. Enough chit chat. Paddywhack, give the dog bone, and I'll see you on the next episode.